I am going to walk you through a complete career exposure audit, start to finish, so you can see the reasoning instead of taking my word for it. The client in this one is fictional. Her name is Dana. She is a 53-year-old communications director at a healthcare system, and she does not exist. I invented her so I could publish the whole document without exposing a real person. Everything else is real. The method, the categories, the reasoning, and the places where the analysis runs out of certainty and says so. If you are considering paying for one of these, this is the honest way to evaluate it. Do not read a sales page. Watch someone do the work. Almost everybody starts in the same place. Will AI take my job? That question has no useful answer. Nobody knows. Anyone who tells you they know is selling something, and usually the thing they are selling is reassurance. The better question is smaller and answerable. Which of the specific things I did last week can a competent person with a model now do in an hour? That question has an answer. You can work it out. And once you have it, the vague dread turns into a list. And a list is something you can act on. Jobs are not units. They're bundles of tasks. A single role routinely contains work that is already highly exposed and work that is barely touched at all. That is why the analysis happens at the task level and never at the job title level. This is not my framework. It is the standard approach in labor research, including the International Labor Organization's 2025 update on occupational exposure, which found that most exposed jobs get transformed rather than eliminated because human input is still required. Transformed is not comforting, but it is different from eliminated, and the difference is where all the useful decisions live. Every task goes into one of three buckets. Automated candidate. Current tools, widely available today, can do this end-to-end at acceptable quality with a person reviewing the output. The human role shrinks to specifying and checking. Augmented candidate. The tools can carry a large share of the effort, but a person still has to direct it, judge it, and be accountable for the result. The human role shifts from producing to deciding. Protected for now. The tools add little because the binding constraint is not producing text or analysis, it is something else. Notice the phrase, protected for now, not protected. That distinction is not hedging. It is the whole point. These are descriptions of today's capability and today's constraints, and the line moves. What does not move as fast is the reason a task is protected. And that reason is the durable thing. Dana reported 6 recurring tasks. Drafting executive communications, about a quarter of her week. Reviewing her team's output, a fifth. Meetings and coordination, another fifth. Internal messaging and intranet content, 15%. Crisis and sensitive issue handling, 10%. Vendor management, 10%. Let me take 3 of those and show the reasoning. Internal messaging and intranet content, 15% of her week. Automated candidate, and it is the clearest one in the whole map. Why? Repeatable inputs, documented rules. Text goes in, text comes out. The cost of an error is low, and errors are visible when they happen. That combination is exactly what current tools handle well. Not most of it, all of it, with a person reading before it goes out. Now, drafting executive communications. A quarter of her week, and this one looks similar on the surface. It is also writing. But it lands in a different bucket. Augmented candidate. Here is the difference. Producing a first draft of a CEO letter is now cheap. What is not cheap is knowing that this particular CEO will never use the word leverage, and that the board chair reads the 3rd paragraph first. That knowledge is not written down anywhere. It exists because Dana has sat in 6 years of meetings, paying attention. A tool can produce the draft. It cannot know the draft is wrong. And then the one that would change everything. What would move this task into the automated bucket? If her organization trained a model on 5 years of approved executive material and handed editing authority to a coordinator, this becomes automated inside a year. That is not a technology prediction. It is an organizational decision, and somebody will make it whether or not Dana is in the room. Third one, crisis and sensitive issue handling. 10% of her week. Protected for now, and it is the most protected task in the map. 4 things protect a task: physical presence, accountability that has to attach to a named person, inputs that are confidential and cannot go into a tool, and a counterparty who has to believe a human is deciding. Most protected tasks have one of those. Crisis handling has all 4 at once. Roughly a quarter of Dana's week is automated candidate work. Roughly half is augmented. Roughly a quarter is protected. I use bands, not decimals. Never 34.2%. She estimated her own timeshares, and running precise arithmetic on somebody's rough guess produces false confidence, which is worse than no number. Here is the finding, and it is not the one she expected. Her job does not disappear. The protected quarter is the part nobody measures. The automated quarter is the part that fills her calendar and justifies her headcount. If the automated quarter goes away and the protected quarter stays invisible, her role looks smaller on paper while being no less necessary in practice. That is a visibility problem before it is a technology problem. And visibility is a much more solvable thing. Dana wrote that she was the only person in a community meeting who remembered a commitment her organization made in 2019. She mentioned it as an aside. It is one of the most valuable things in her intake. That is institutional memory, and it is not in any document. It exists because she was there and she was paying attention. You cannot hire it, you cannot download it, and a new person cannot have it in year 1. She also described talking a service line director out of a public statement that would have created a regulatory problem. Read that again as a business event. She prevented a regulatory problem, and there is no record of it anywhere, because prevented problems leave no evidence. Her chief financial officer will never see it. Individually, none of her strengths are rare. Plenty of people have organizational memory. Plenty can tell a senior person no. Plenty can translate between clinical and financial vocabularies. Holding all 3 at once is rare, and it is why sensitive things route to her desk. Roles built on rare combinations get described by their most common component. In Dana's case, that component is writing. That mislabeling is the actual risk in her situation, and correcting it is most of what the report does. I want to show you this section specifically because it is the reason a document like this is worth paying for. One of Dana's recommended actions is to take ownership of the AI writing tool her organization already bought. Write the usage guidelines. Propose herself as the reviewer for communications output. It is the highest leverage move available to her. It changes her position rather than her workload. It also carries a risk that does not resolve. To own the tool, she has to help configure it. Helping configure it means teaching it her voice calibration, which is one of the things making her hard to replace. So, refusing to participate gets her excluded from the decision. Leading it keeps her name on the outcome and puts her fingerprints on some of her own displacement. There is no clean answer. The report says so in those words. That is the difference between analysis and marketing material. Marketing material finds the version where every move is upside. Real analysis names the trade and lets you decide, because it is your career and not mine. Dana reported under 2 hours a week available. She is the primary earner, she is geographically tied, and she has a full-time job that is already too big. So the plan is 9 actions, and every one of them fits in that. The first one takes 10 minutes to set up. Keep a plain text file. When you prevent a problem, write one line. No names, no detail. That is it. That is the highest priority action in the entire report. It sounds trivial. It is not. Her top-ranked weakness was output visibility, and this is the cheapest possible intervention against it. Monthly, those lines become 3 neutral sentences in the update her executives already read. A plan you will not do is worth nothing. If somebody hands a person with 2 free hours a week a 20-item transformation roadmap, they have written a document that will be read once and never opened again. Every report ends with this section, and it is not modesty. Dana's report rests on 4 assumptions: that her reported timeshares are roughly accurate, that her organization's AI adoption continues instead of stalling, that her standing with executives is as durable as her examples suggest, and that tool capability in writing tasks stays stable enough for a 90-day plan to make sense. If her organization abandons the tool, most of the urgency evaporates and the visibility work still holds. If her standing is weaker than she thinks, the ownership proposal fails, and that failure tells her something important she did not previously know. The plan is built so that when an assumption breaks, it produces information rather than waste. Anybody who writes you an analysis with no stated assumptions has either not found them or is not telling you. 3 things plainly. This is not financial, investment, tax, legal, employment law, or mental health advice. Nothing in any of these reports touches money or when anyone should stop working. It is not a prediction about whether your job will exist. I do not know, nor does anyone else. And it is not recruiting. No resumes, no introductions, no employer contacted, ever. It is a map of where you stand and a sequence you can test. That is the whole offer. The complete report I just walked through is on the site, free, no email required. Read it in full and judge the work directly. If you want one written for your own role, it is $249. You complete a 20-minute intake, and the report comes back within 5 business days. If you would rather just take the 3 categories and sort your own week on a piece of paper tonight, do that instead. It is a genuinely useful hour, and it costs nothing. Either way, the thing worth avoiding is finding out where you stand later, when somebody else is setting the timeline.